Hi, welcome to Fireside Snack. Let's grab a snack and sit down to chat. We're Abbi and Gabby, two recovery coaches eager to share our lived and professional experience in the world of mental health and eating disorders. In our time together, we hope to grab a bite to eat and connect with ourselves and each other. Our hope with this podcast is to inspire you to take care of yourself by building a life you don't want to run away from. As a disclaimer, the information shared in this podcast is based on the personal experiences of Abbi and Gabby and is intended for informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are seeking support or have concerns about your mental health, please consult with a licensed professional. Enjoy your fireside snack. Hey, welcome to Fireside Snack. I'm Gabby.
And I'm Abbi.
And this is our Recovery Lived Experience podcast where we have a snack, we sit down to chat. Abbi, what you rocking with for snack today?
So I have the on sale grocery special, if you can see my little coupon on the side. So this is new. Chobani Creations. It's caramel sundae. I'm really excited. I haven't had it before.
Does it have like things in it? Like what makes it a creation, I guess?
Yeah, I pre-stirred because I don't think you need to hear that. It had like some caramel on the bottom, I guess. It looks good. I'm excited to taste it.
Hot diggity. Are you rocking with water too?
I don't even have my water.
Oh my gosh.
So
I hope that you stay hydrated, or either you're by a window and you can like photosynthesize something.
I've discovered Crystal Light packets again that you can put in to flavor your water. So I drank like an entire jug of lemonade just like 30 minutes ago. So the real challenge will be to not need to use the bathroom during the podcast.
Ooh, that's gonna be fun. Well, just know that you also can. Like, you don't have to ask, like, remember in school when you would be like, can I go to the bathroom? And they're like, I don't know, can you? And you're like, may I? Please? Yes. You don't have to do that. Just let me know. We'll pause it. I have a Luna bar, which I know everybody's really been waiting on. We got no comments and nobody really cared, but I cared, and I have this Luna bar. It's nuts over chocolate, which I'm excited about. It was either that or like a peppermint bark one, and I'm not pepper. Oh, this is not what I was expecting it to look like. It's just a bar.
Oh, it's got like drizzle.
Yeah, wow. Well, this is exciting. So this is what I'm rocking with for our episode. To be fair, me and my partner ordered Indian food last night. So I have had that as well. I love a good like paneer tikka masala. So that's that's my jam. Abbi, how should we get started? Because we didn't have an episode last week. And I feel like maybe we should talk a little bit about why, because I think for a lot of people, we feel like the world is on fire, or there's like a great conflict of kind of putting people first or putting like power and control first. And so I'm curious how that's impacted you directly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we get to start off talking about this. Actually, last week about this time when Gabby and I met, I joined and she was like, honey, what's going on? Like, your face is not right. I was stressed. There's a lot going on that impacted me with like school that I'm doing right now and just trying to figure out what that means for future, for right now. And it was a lot to handle. My nervous system was overridden, to say the least. And Gabby had like a beautiful reminder to me that what we preach in all of this is to be respectful of ourselves, to take care of our needs. And so in doing that, we decided to postpone a week. I'm glad we did, Gabby. I don't know about you. I'm feeling like more of me is here today. And I'm excited to bring that to the podcast.
I am so glad that you were able to refill your cup, because a lot of things that I feel like in the news right now, it's like, bah, 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 and you're like, ah. So I also just wanted to like hold space because there's a lot of things going on right now in regards especially to folks who are non-binary or who fall on the spectrum of gender identity, and a lot of things that are kind of negating that identity as well. And so I think this is a really big time where we need to take care of ourselves and we need to put ourselves first, because the world isn't doing that right now. So I'm glad that we were able to take the week off. We were able to refill our cups. I've been doing a lot of like meditating and self-reflection, and I think it's really easy to get angry at the world and view the world as something that's bad, and all these actions as bad. But I think when you really look at it, like the desire for power and control, or to, I don't know, try and have power over another group of people, is really just kind of like an insecurity that somebody else has that they're kind of projecting onto you. So yeah, I'm glad we're here.
Me too. And I actually think it's an interesting segue. Not that all forms of control are the same, but we're talking about food today. And in eating disorders and eating disorder recovery, food has a big role. We say all the time, it's not about the food, but there's a lot of food that comes into the equation. Something that comes up a lot is the term food freedom. Gabby, I don't know. I feel like you have some information for us today, a little bit about what that is and what that might look like.
Yeah, we got into some research this week, which was exciting. I know me and Abbi both are like very research heavy. What it means to me is really the ability to eat without restrictions, guilt, or fear. It's about being in control of what you eat and not letting the food control you, which I think is a really beautiful thing. I found a definition from a website called Everglow Nutrition, and I really liked their definition. It said, it's making food choices from a place of ease and nourishment versus fear, fixation, and deprivation. It's rediscovering the joy of food before it became intertwined with diet culture.
Oof.
Yeah.
And I just, something about that definition really gets into the relationship aspect of food. And if we're talking about food freedom, it's like separation from another entity. Like what does that look like? We have a relationship with food, whether we want to acknowledge or not, whether it's in a place that's adaptive or maladaptive. But that's really cool. I like that definition.
And I'm curious, like, what, for you, Abbi, what did your life look like before food freedom was incorporated into the equation? What was your relationship like with food?
So toxic is, first and foremost, it was something I hated, wanted to distance myself from, and yet spent every moment focusing on. So there was like this weird contrast between what I like that I wanted for myself and yet what I spent all my energy doing. A lot of the control. How do I manipulate things? How can I cheat the system that's not really cheatable? How, like, going into these extremes, and so draining. It made daily life functioning a challenge.
It's so interesting that you say that, because food is something that's nourishment, right? It's energy. It's supposed to be the thing that's giving you life. And when you're in your eating disorder, I feel like it's the thing that zaps all of your energy away. Yeah. For me in particular, I remember like spending my entire day, whether I was like, I remember being in college or being in high school and sitting in class, and like I'm paying attention in class, right? But I'm also, in the back of my head, I'm always doing like ED math. That's what I would call it, of like, how do I figure out what I'm going to eat for the day? How do I compensate for things? This, that, and the other. I was always stuck on things being like good or bad, which gave me a very small margin of foods that I was allowed to eat without compensating with a specific behavior.
So this brings an interesting question. Like, both of us being in that state of being, what did food freedom feel like to you when you were first jumping into recovery?
I think for me, food freedom felt like being able to trust myself with food. I think it really boiled down to knowing that I can listen to myself and build a better life for myself outside of like counting calories and using MyFitnessPal. But I think that self-trust piece was really, really hard. And it was not cultivated overnight, right? I would sometimes feel like I would have a little bit of food freedom and then I'd get scared. And I was like, oh my gosh, this freedom is so scary. I've never had this before. And I would walk it back. Curious for you what your experience was like.
Three words. I had to count for a second. My first thought was, what a lie. like, you cannot tell me something like that is possible. Like, complete disbelief, rejection that, like, or you say that that can work from somebody else. You've never experienced what this disorder has looked like for me. You don't know that it's possible. So I was kind of hostile to the idea of food freedom at first, but
Valid.
settling into the way you described, Gabby, the like walking into food freedom a little bit and then retreating, like, oh gosh, that's really not safe. That pattern of back and forth, was really ultimately what got me to where I am today, but it's exhausting to go back and forth and a lot to manage.
Yeah. I love that you talked about the fear in relation to food freedom or the hostility, because I feel like hostility and fear really go hand in hand. We're typically hostile towards things we're afraid of. I think that for me, I also thought, well, food freedom is okay for other people, an XYZ body type, but it will never be for me, right? I would watch and consume so much media of people, like, I felt like a big thing was like people who were in smaller bodies who'd be like, yeah, I just like eat a cheeseburger and I never do anything. And you're just kind of like, whoa, that's their life, but I will never have that for myself. And so I think food freedom also felt like othering for a very long time, of like, similar to what you said, this will never be achievable for me. And so I'm going to bash it because it's not in the cards for me.
And I think like that example you just gave is why addressing our relationship with food is so important, beyond just, okay, I'm going to have the meal plan that I've been giving, or I'm going to nourish myself differently, because it has an impact beyond just food. Relationships with others. Are we feeling separated from a group because we don't feel like our experience at a party is going to be the same that someone else's is because I'm not going over to the snack table? So it's an interesting, like, how the feelings that we have towards food seep into other areas of our lives. Body image, friends, family, connection. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, and it definitely impacts your values, because one of my leading values is being loving and compassionate. And when you see somebody have something that you don't view as attainable to you, it's very easy to dislike that, or to cast judgment on those people, or to that othering component of like, I think that the grass is greener on the other side, and so screw your grass and screw you, because I'll never have that grass.
Yeah.
I think was a very, very big thing for me. So I think it also caused me to have a lot of like jealousy and envy towards especially other women. I would really, really be kind of combative or judgmental towards other women just based on appearances or things that I saw about them, or you see somebody who is thriving and smiling and laughing, and you don't feel that way on the inside. So it's very easy to just want to pick apart everything that they're doing to put them down on the level that you're on, which says way more about you than them,
And that value divide showed up so many places in my eating disorders, especially with food. And that things that I thought were improving me, like, I'm doing this because I'm making myself better. This is like a moral high ground, which doesn't exist with food. But what I was telling myself was the opposite of my values of like building connection, kindness, empathy. It was taking me farther away, though I was saying I was doing it to make it stronger. So it's an interesting divide.
And that moral high ground is so interesting too, because it's also just a way for us to feel like we have control. Like, us trying to put ourselves above somebody else is us trying to control the narrative of what somebody else thinks about us, right? It's what we're trying to project out into the world. I do this, so I am wonderful, amazing, incredible. And what's funny though is, like, as I've gotten older, I realize that no matter what I say or do or show up as, some people will just not like me. They will not be picking up what I am putting down. And I can contort and change and try and shift myself into all of these different things. And if I'm in a room with 100 people, probably at least one of those people is not going to like me at every version that I try and contort myself into, right? So
Yeah.
I also think that was a big thing too, of the food was controlling me, because I was trying to contort myself into an image that I thought would be more digestible for other people to, kind of consume me and be around me.
I feel like there's moments like this when you share every week that I just need to like pause in that because it's such a true, like, it's deep struggle that acknowledging that alone, and making other choices is so hard because we're taught, like, it's socialized in us that conforming to fit whatever is easiest is going to cause the least friction. So do it while not looking at what that means for ourselves. So I'm really glad you shared that part because it's huge and it is so impactful.
I'm curious too, Abby. So what was the steps that you took to start incorporating food freedom after the hostility kind of passed, after you dipped your toes into things? What was some stuff that you kind of either threw out or held on to that kept you in alignment with food freedom?
Something that I implemented, not necessarily in a loving way at first, was exposures. I know that's like can carry a lot of like anxiety around the thoughts of exposures, but if it's just sitting with a different element at a meal that usually I would avoid. Or for me, I had like certain foods that I would only use at certain occasions. And so starting to enjoy those bit by bit to like push me out of my comforts a bit, but also be like respectful of my nervous system and where I was at in that moment, and that made all the difference. The other thing is, I'm so glad you mentioned MyFitnessPal. Block it, delete
Yeah.
it, kick it off your phone, delete the
Kick it.
account.
Right to the people who created it. Tell them to take it down. Yeah.
Any of those sites that like you're on, I had like multiple, right? No, like that has to go because it's feeding. I already had enough going on in my brain, and those were like giving some fuel to the fire. It's like, let's keep a record, and like all those anxieties just get to continue to build. So kicking the trackers to the curb, and then also communicating more openly with people that I loved what my experience with food was like. So not like bristling quite as much at the thought of like, hey, Abby, what'd you have for lunch today? And I was going to lie no matter what. And
Yeah, for sure.
instead breaking into like, I just didn't enjoy this, or I did something that I wouldn't want to do in the future, but starting to decrease the shame and stigma and pressure around it allowed me to explore.
I feel like this has been around for a long time, but I remember when I was a young adult, late teenager, a lot of things that were really popular was fad diets, so Whole30, the keto, all of those things. And I remember when I was super deep into my eating disorder, I wanted to try all of those things because it's me being healthy, right? Everybody kind of health washes it and makes it sound like it's this very appealing thing, but I realized that I was putting my body in a restrictive state. And so then when I would get off of those diets and I would allow myself to have access to these foods, I would typically binge on those foods because they weren't regularly incorporated into my diet, which I love that you talked about the food exposures because that's truly it. When I was, 18 to even like 25, I did not know that a food exposure was even a thing. I had never heard of it until really I started working in the eating disorder specific field. I read something kind of cool. It says not allowing specific foods into your body is like a toddler not being allowed to have dessert. When you tell your toddler the dessert is off limits, they want the dessert more. It's a natural response to having forbidden foods.
Yeah. What we resist persists was like something that came up with me earlier this week. It's like, oh my gosh, the more I'm like, don't go over there, don't go over there. What am I'm thinking about over there?
What we resist persists also has to do with our emotions and how we eat. So I think food freedom to me was also not allowing my emotions to dictate if I deserve nourishment or not, which was a really big thing for me. There's specific emotions as like a femme that are not allowed, especially anger. And I would never really let myself feel angry. And so instead of allowing myself to feel this feeling and just drop into it and let it feel visceral to me, I would repress it and then also repress my nourishment as well because I didn't deserve to eat because I'm so angry at myself for feeling anger.
And I think when we think of like it as a coping mechanism, it makes so much sense that what we translate, oh my gosh, I'm restricting this feeling that there's the increase, like the parallel increase in restriction. If you're feeling out of control emotionally, maybe you feel out of control with food. And honestly, it can say a lot that all of a sudden, if I've been in recovery for years now, and there are some times where like, I feel really freaking out of control in this meal. What is going on? And then I'm able to pause and go, like, emotionally, I've had this thing go on that I feel out of control with. How can I self-soothe otherwise? But that like connection between the way things look with food and how they might look in other areas of our lives can be a great method of like check-in too, even as like I am years down the road in recovery.
I think that's why earlier you said it's about the food, but it's not about the food. There's so many layers to the eating disorder. Yeah, I really enjoy this topic. I know we wanted to talk about food freedom and share our experience with that. I think another thing that we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into is what are roles of food outside of just nourishment? And I think, Abby, you have a little bit to speak on with this.
I do. I have a whole bunch to speak on with this. This is something that I get very impassioned about because I think there are two key parts here. One is the whole it's not about the food, but it's about the food, the roles that food are playing. And the second is like, oh my gosh, I'm meeting my meal plan, I'm fueling my body. Why does this all still suck? Because food does more than nourishment. It's such a huge role of food, but it's not the only one. So I have like 6 roles. We'll see like what ends up going with it for today. But there's some big ones that I felt important to touch on. Gabby, I'm gonna like take your temperature like during and see like your thoughts and experiences with some of these.
Yay.
So the first is that food is culture and community. You can go with like how you grew up around food. How did you sit at a meal? What kind of conversation was allowed? How did you hold your silverware? Did you sit on the floor? Were you at a table? There's practices, there's cultural traditions, everything that's steeped around food, certain dishes, certain times of years. I know for my family, there's a chocolate eclair cake that's put in every single Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it's more than just an item. It is the event. There's like how we operate around it. There's a tradition around it that we experience every year. Gabby, have you experienced food as culture or food as community?
I think, for me personally, I was raised with a single mom, and so a lot of my meals were by myself unless I was at school or something, but I kind of had to learn how to cook and survive on my own. And so I feel like that also kind of fueled my eating disorder because nobody had really modeled to me how to interact with food or how to even cook. I didn't really feel comfortable in the kitchen. It felt like anytime I did try and make something, it was just kind of like imploding in on itself. And I would get really frustrated because I would spend so much time making something and then I didn't like the way it tasted or it didn't come out perfect or things like that. But in terms of community, one of the big things that my family did do was every weekend we would go out to eat, or specifically like my grandfather and he would always pick me up and we would go have breakfast together. And that was like a very big time for connection. It was a time that like me and my family would sit down and talk and catch up on the week and look at each other and see each other. And so I feel like to me, like going out to eat or like sharing a meal with somebody is so impactful because it slows you down. Yeah, and it allows you to kind of like sink into the space. I also think it can be beneficial too because it can provide a little bit of distraction if you are stressed out about the meal itself. And having other people around you to talk and share with can be really helpful.
Yeah. And I think for anyone listening, it can be really powerful to look at the way your relationship food functions in each of these roles, because it may be that I feel really strong about my connection with food as community, but one of the later ones I feel lost in it, and it's okay to like pinpoint that, explore it a little bit. I think Gabby gave some like great examples of how that looks, and I hope I will too, as like a medium to kind of play with.
I know, I'm looking at your next bullet point and I'm like, I've got nothing on this one. Like I have I'm ready for my temperature to be taken because it's going to come out as 0. Like, there's no pulse.
So the next role of food that I have here is food as play. Food is a medium that we can play with. There's very literal and then some more abstract things. You give a toddler some applesauce, it's going everywhere. It's a design. As a kid, I made macaroni necklaces or little designs on paper with noodles. It can also look like baking, trying new recipes. If you're a big fan of exploring with food in that way, getting a new ingredient, adding it, being a little adventurous, that's all examples of food with play. I like this. I like to play around with food. When I plate my food, I like to make smiley faces. A little ridiculous, but I do. It's just something that brings some extra joy. So I would put myself like a 7 out of 10 and like strength with food as play. I really enjoy it. But Gabby, it seems like maybe there's some differences in connection with this one for you.
Yeah, play. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, I have no idea what that looks like. But after you explained it, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Somebody who's been a really good model for me, because like I said, I got no pulse on this one, but somebody who's been a great model for me is my partner. He is always in the kitchen cooking, and he loves to eyeball stuff. He's like, I'll just throw a little bit of this in there, and that'll probably taste good. And I'm like, how do you know that? Like, how? Yeah. But it's because he's been so in depth of experimenting with food and trying things out. I mean, like, he's like very science minded already. So everything's like an experiment for him. But like, it's really exciting to me to watch him just kind of go for it. Am I always in alignment with what comes out as the product? No, but he likes it, and that brings me a lot of joy that he's listening to his music and enjoying himself. And I've been really trying to incorporate some of those practices as well. Of cooking doesn't have to be a chore. I can also listen to my podcast and do my little dance moves. I guess I'm maybe not a 0. Maybe I'm like a 10. Temperature wise on this one, like a 10 out of 100.
Well, and I think it's a good point that the goal is not to be 100% on every role for food. I think like a great example for this is I would say like my mom's superpower. She's the same way. Like, oh, what'd you put in that? Oh, I just, explored until I felt like it tasted right. Mind blown. But for me, fear stands in the way of acting like that when I'm making food because I need it to be right. And so that play is interrupted some because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to try it. Whereas like my mom's strength is like, see how this tastes. So it's just not always a bad thing. Okay, we're not super in touch with food as play, but it is interesting to explore maybe why it's like that. Because some people hate cooking and that's real and normal and, but just an example.
That used to be me, for sure. Like, if I have too many pots and pans going, I am like, ah! Yeah. I just get very overwhelmed and stressed out. I'm excited for your next one as well. I feel like I definitely, I got that one on lock.
So this next roll of food is my favorite. There's a lot to it, but the next is food as support and food as comfort. 2 examples immediately come to mind for me. And one is that when I'm sick, I need a grilled cheese. That grilled cheese, I don't know what is about it. My healing powers increase exponentially. Fever be gone. Watch out, I have a grilled cheese. The other way that I think maybe be a little bit more different for people is that on really stressful days, I'm like, I can't wait till I have some ice cream. And I give it to myself. And like, let's talk about this. This is complicated. Eating for comfort is stigmatized in the actual disordered eating and in the recovery process because it's trickier to navigate. It was for me early on in recovery, and what I do now is a little different than what I could do then. But it doesn't mean that food isn't made to be comforting, that it doesn't serve that role. Denying that something is like a craving because it would just feel good for your soul isn't a bad thing. The difference is it a tool that I'm using to comfort myself, or is it the only thing I have to self-soothe? So there's plenty of times where I get my mom's cooking and I'm like, I need an extra serving of all this stuff. I don't get this. I'm eating for comfort here, right? It's the emotional connection. This is my mom's cooking. I enjoy this. Versus every time I miss my mom, I'm going to have more to fill the void of missing. So there's the difference, right? An experience, a connection versus like a numbing. But I think this role gets skipped a lot when we talk about recovery, and it's a big one. Gabby.
Yes.
Thoughts, feelings?
Absolutely. I'm so glad, because I was waiting for you to mention that piece of, is it being used as a tool or is it being used as something to fill the void? Because there is a specific eating disorder called binge eating disorder, and I've also, had experience with that as well, because it was, I think the biggest difference for me is like the mindfulness of the support versus the mindlessness that I was utilizing food for.
Yeah.
So I would just kind of be feeling out of control with the comfort that I needed from this food. It felt like the food was a never-ending faucet that I needed to replenish myself with.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like, to your point, after I have a really hard week or a hard day, my go-to thing is I will order myself Thai food. I love Thai food.
Yeah.
It's my favorite food. And so my partner knows, don't bring flowers, don't bring chocolates, bring me some pad ki mao, and I will feel better, and I will have a smile on my face because it's something I love and enjoy, and I want it,
Yeah.
Whereas I need it to get through my day. I need food, but I don't need this thing to regulate me or reassure me of my value or worth.
And this is a trickier role of food for people that have experienced disordered eating. I know for me, it took me a long time to figure out, well, which one is it? Is this a tool or am I filling the void? And it wasn't perfect. Bringing that curiosity, I think, can be good here. I try not to give direct, like, don't do this, do this. But don't feel ashamed because you crave things. It makes sense. We're made to crave. We're made to want things. We're made for it to be soothing. That is all okay. You don't have to abandon it to be mindful or eat to the T of like a meal plan. The goal is to like live a full life as a human, and food is a part of that. And it's okay to let it be that way. I don't know. That took me so long to hear and like grasp that I just want everyone in recovery, experiencing an eating disorder, never experiencing an eating disorder, to understand that about food.
Absolutely. And I feel like that goes really into your next point as well. How food relates to experiences, and how sometimes we can crave the past, or maybe food being a bridge to something in our past. So I want you to speak to that one too.
So the next role of food is nostalgia. I mentioned my mom's cooking a moment ago, and some of that is like the memories of more than just the food, the smell and the voice. I even think there was something called bug juice that my brother and I would get when we would go camping. And the second I see it in a grocery store, like my mind is, I'm 9-year-old me on a campground in North Georgia, trying to think the little fool's gold pica on rocks was real gold and I was a millionaire. It's so inherently tied. And that can be scary and exciting. So there's a lot of weight that this can carry, but food has a big role in nostalgia. Gabby, do you have any examples of this in your life?
Yeah, I have like a very concrete example, and I will show you in a second. And for those of you who are watching us on YouTube or Spotify, get ready because I'm about to show some skin. Food for nostalgia for me, I think specifically about my grandfather. So when I was growing up, he started introducing how to cook. And so one of the big things that my family has passed down for generations is our salsa recipe, because Mexican food is very, very big in my family. And so I'll just show you a little bit. But this is my tattoo of my
Gabby,
salsa
put it
recipe.
away. Oh my gosh. No, I'm kidding. You
show skin. Show skin. It's really something that holds so much meaning and value to me, of my grandfather thinking that I should be included in our family's lineage, and that this is a recipe that tells a story that we can share.
Yeah.
And it was something that we would do together. We would eat it together. We would test it out to see if it was hot enough. And that was something where I got to experiment a little bit with food as well. So I think maybe the play aspect was incorporated there as well. But Yeah, I have like a very specific memory to that, so much so that I got it tattooed on my body because it means so
I
much
love it.
to me.
And I actually got goosebumps as you were describing it because you could tell like the power and the food and the memory and like what that serves. Again, it's not about the food, but it's about the food. The recipe, there's the salsa, and yet there's so much more with it. I think important to note here for me, this also was really difficult when I was coming out of foods that I used to binge on or compensate afterwards. The
Yes.
the memory that was tied to certain foods were behaviors. So having them later on in the future, when I had the food, my thought was not what a like wonderful recipe my mom made, which was my more comfortable example. It was, oh my gosh, the behaviors I used to do, and I'm not going to do them right now. What does this mean for me? So it can be hard for food to serve this world too, and it's all about that curiosity. But it's okay for some of these to have multiple sides to them, something that you enjoy connecting with and some that you wish I wish I didn't connect with this role of food as much right now.
And I think too, it's things that represent behaviors, but it can also be things that we have trauma around. It could be I have a trauma because when I was eating this food, X, Y, and Z happened and it completely changed my life and upended things. So I think it can be related to
Yeah.
behaviors. I think it can be related to negative and positive experiences.
Yeah, the food can be painful, and I think that's why we have such complex relationships with it. I'm glad that we like are taking some time to acknowledge that as well. The next role of food is present in every single one that we've talked about. It's food as connection. It's similar to community or culture, a little bit more zoomed in, micro personal. But if I'm asking a friend to hang out, I'm asking them to go to coffee or for dinner. I'm sitting down with my family around the holidays and I feel more connected through it. I mean, thank goodness I love the people that I haven't seen in a long time. Obviously, I want to meet with them, but if I had to sit with them in like two chairs looking at each other, awkward. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Like, throw me like a good meal in the mix. I'm game. I'm down for it. And it facilitates connection. Food makes holidays in a lot of ways, and it's that example of connection.
I love going out to eat. That's my thing because, like I said, not super into cooking, but I love having a meal to share and be excited about and have around. I also love going to my friends' houses for dinner and things like that. Ask me to host a dinner and I will have anxiety. I'm also thinking a lot too about one of my favorite things to do with my partner is we go to a new restaurant and we examine the menu and we talk about all of the different things that are on the menu, and we love trying new stuff. Even when we went to Europe last year, and that was the most exciting thing for us, was going to different restaurants and having all kinds of different things similar to food as culture too. Trying different cultures and learning about them through the food is also very cool and exciting to me. So I love these points. Yes.
Yeah, and I venture to say, Gabby, that's also an example of some food as play. There's exploration, there's some energy in there that I just see as play.
Maybe I should give myself more credit. I don't know.
And like speaking of credit, the next role of food and the last one that I will share because I could probably list 50 is food as celebration. Food is present in a big way at events, going out to dinner after a promotion, birthday cake, wedding cake. I saw recently on social media they had this cake and there's like a little piece of paper that somebody pulled out, turned out to be cash. They're like pulling cash out of the middle of the cake. I mean, that is as central as food can get to a celebration. It's not just a part of it, it is the celebration. The time we put into decorating cakes and planning menus attest to that. In my eating disorder, I hated this. I lost the fact that food could be celebration. I narrowed the role of food to nutrition, and any celebration was scary. I felt panicked and lost at parties. That self-other difference that you mentioned earlier, Gabby, was really at play for me here, and I was disconnected. Again, it's like attesting to the role of food as connection because all I could think about was nutrition. This is something I've regained in recovery to not a fault, but if there's anything going on, I need to go get something to celebrate. And I'm bringing home a favorite juice, or there's this Publix as a grocery store near me, like a specific tart that like, dang it, I like did two good things today. I'm going to celebrate it. But there's a big role that food plays in that. Gabby, I'm curious not just your experience with celebration now, but maybe how that has looked over time.
I think that something that was interesting to me was, anytime that food was used as a celebration, I was absent. Whether I would physically not go to things. I remember in college, we would have like pizza parties all the time or at work. And I'd be like, I'm out, I gotta go. I gotta leave. This isn't for me. Or I would be absent because I would be so in my head about what was happening or how I was going to do this or how I was going to do that or how other people were going to perceive me. And if me enjoying my food was going to ruin the celebration because I guess I am the sun and everything revolves around me and everybody's watching. You know what I mean? But I think that that's what's so hard too is we're talking about all these things like culture and community, connection, nostalgia. It's very related to our relationship with others and the outside world. And I think what's so hard about our eating disorder is that it kind of makes us self-centered. It kind of makes us self-absorbed where we're so worried about either how we're going to be perceived or how we're going to get through X, Y, and Z that we're not even present for what's happening or for the joys or the woes of what other people are going through. I know I was not as present as I could have been for friends and family when they were experiencing different things because I was so absorbed by my eating disorder.
I have like a great example with this when it comes to my brother. During the height of my eating disorder, we have like an entire an attic space that was converted to 2 bedrooms, and then it had a Jack and Jill bathroom, and we spent all our time together, but I was not aware of how my behaviors were impacting my brother, and my brother's experienced some trauma with what I've been through, a very real way. We've had to heal in our relationship from it, and at no point in time was I going, I'm gonna hurt my brother, but I was so collapsed in on myself that I could not see anybody else, and the values that I held when it came to connection, I could not fill, I could not maintain. The term collapsed in on myself is there is no eyes that I could see out of because I was so focused inward. So it's very, very real. I guess, how have you cultivated these roles, cognizantly or not, in your recovery? Because we're talking about a relationship, and dynamics to change can be a lot. So I want to say, first and foremost, the biggest thing for me has been time, because these for me took longer than restoring nutrition for me. Even after I was eating regularly, meeting my needs with food, it took longer to heal the relationships that I had with food, right? So for me, doing it with others, as scary and as foreign as that is, you're kind of forcing some connection there, but also you get to see other people model it, which is huge. All of a sudden, it doesn't look so hateful that my friend can do this thing with food. Maybe now I'm testing the waters a little bit with it. So cultivating it happened with others, not in isolation. Everything for me happened in isolation with my eating disorder. So getting out of that, especially with the roles of food and connecting, was a big point for me.
I think one of the biggest things that I had to do as I was entering recovery was I had to be very mindful about who I would surround myself with when I was interacting with food. Yeah. So I think, and this is to no fault of anybody's, because it's a sickness that's kind of permeating our culture. But if I was around people who were yucking my yum or who had very strict food rules, I'm not going to eat with you, because this is going to be very hard and very difficult. So being very mindful about surrounding yourself with people who enjoy food and who are living out these roles, like you said, modeling them for you was so huge and important. And being able to consume food without judgment, I think, was a very big one for me. I know that as coaches, we're always saying, there's no good or bad foods. It's energy, it's nourishment, and really being around people who embodied that was very, very important. So being around other people with that kind of double-edged sword of food being comfort and food being support, having mindful eating and trying to sit with food as opposed to just view it as something that I need to get over with. So really trying to get in touch with my hunger fullness cues. Do I like the taste of this food? Do I like the texture of this food? Really getting into the nitty gritty weeds of it. Mindful eating is not something that you just jump into, though, right? When you start recovery, it's very uncomfortable to sit in your body when you're in very early stages of recovery. So that was definitely something I cultivated over time. And it's something I still work on today. I also really been trying more and more not to like be watching TV and be like distracting myself when I eat, which was a very good coping skill that I utilized very early on in recovery.
And that's a great point on how these things can change, and what you need to do now or what works for you now might adapt in the future. An example for me is a big part of starting to get more into food freedom and then just different roles of food was having new foods, which has become a part of my play and my community, the culture aspect. So it's become a staple that I've found that I really enjoy. But for me, having something that I don't have an experience with, I don't have that nostalgic connection in ways that may not be so positive, to try some new practices around food was helpful.
I love that. I think that's a very astute point. We've talked about food freedom. We've talked about the different roles of food. We had our freaking snacks, and that was very, very enjoyable to us. On our final note, share that we're still releasing weekly episodes, and if we don't release weekly episodes, it's because we're taking care of ourselves. We have gotten questions about, like, is your episode coming out next week? And yes, we will do our darndest to make sure that they are coming out, but not at the cost of our own well-being or sanity. If we're not walking the talk on the podcast, like, what is this podcast?
Yeah. And as always, folks, and especially as you listen, any thoughts that come to mind, questions. You say this, what does this look like? Or actually that made me curious about some other aspect of food or body image. Anything that comes to mind, email us, firesidesnack@gmail.com. We're watching. We want to answer questions. We want to be accessible. Gabby's done some great work making things more interactive on Spotify. Check us out there. Engage. We want this to be a community as we talk about community and togetherness so much. That's why we have our snack togethers. We're excited that y'all are here. Please keep coming back. Please communicate with us. And I'm pretty darn excited about this, Gabby. This is episode 3 of a million.
Yeah, I just like talking with you, Abby. It's just very nice. It's very enjoyable. But again, thank you all so much for listening. Even if you just want to send us over what you're having for snack, we'd love to know. Add it to the grocery list. Add it to our new foods list. I'm trying to incorporate this play. Tell me what's up. Show me things. But as always, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Fireside Snack is hosted by Abbi Dinges and Gabby Buckner. Editing, music, and artwork by Gabby Buckner. Please email us at firesidesnack@gmail.com with your recovery questions and be on the lookout for weekly episodes. Thank you for joining us for Fireside Snack and for filling our cups up with gratitude. Enjoy your week.